Naxalism is the biggest threat to the internal security of our country. And this is said by none other than the former Prime Minister of our country, Dr. Manmohan Singh. Now, around 26 Naxalites have been killed as of January 2025 in different separate encounters in Chhattisgarh so far. And it has been the mid of January till now. Until now, around 26 Naxalites have been killed. Now, even after numerous initiatives and steps taken by the central government, state government and the armed forces as well, left-wing extremism and Naxalism is still very much prevalent in our country. And it still remains a very big threat to the security and integrity of our whole nation. Now, in an earlier video titled Naxalism and Maoism, we have already covered the nitty-gritties, the genesis and the causes of Naxalism in a great bit of detail. Now, in today's session, our focus would be mostly upon the government initiatives for tackling Naxalism and what can be the possible solutions and what are the loopholes in government initiatives which can be done better in order to eliminate this internal security threat completely from our country altogether. Hello, my name is Preetpal Singh and all of you are watching Perspective. Now, in 2024, India has observed around 162 Maoist-related incidents. And out of this 162 incidents, 141 alone are in Chhattisgarh. Now, this figure marks the highest casualty figures for extremists since 2004, that is since the formation of Communist Party of India Maoist. Now, while the Maoist casualties have increased over the years, the deaths of the security force personnel they have come down. In 2024, around 14 security personnel they lost their lives, compared to 198 security personnel losing their lives in 2007. Also, the number of civilian deaths have been lowest since 2014, with only 23 civilians tragically killed in Maoist attacks in the year 2024. Now, let's briefly discuss about Naxalism. Now, the term Naxalism comes from the Naxalbari village of West Bengal. Now, it originated as a local rebellion against the local landlords who bashed a peasant over a land dispute. Now, the rebellion was initiated in the year 1967 with an objective of rightful distribution of land across the people and peasants under the leadership of Kanu Sanyal and Jagat Santhal. Now, it is considered that Naxals, they support Maoist ideology and Maoist political sentiments. Now, what is Maoist political sentiment? Now, Maoism is a form of a communist ideology which was developed by Mao Zedong, and it is a doctrine to capture the power of the state through a combination of three things, that is armed insurgency, mass mobilization and strategic alliances. So this is Maoism, and many believe that Naxals, they are of Maoist ideologies. That is why we call it as Naxalism and Maoism being spread in India. And these Naxals and Maoism philosophy combined together, since these philosophies are left-leaning towards the left, we call it as left-wing extremism. Now, combined Naxalism and Maoism in our country are titled as left-wing extremism problem in India. Now, the areas where this left-wing extremism problem is prevalent, you can see in the map. These areas are referred as red corridor. And the red corridor in our country have shrunk over the last 2 decades. But still, we need to understand what are the factors leading to emergence of left-wing extremism. Only then we'll be able to understand the solutions. See, the factors can be clubbed under 3 categories. Jal, Jungle, Zameen. That is water, forest and land. Now, forced labor. Taking over the land resources by the outsiders. Evasion of land ceiling laws. Denial of land claims. And poorly framed legislations, they are curtailing the rights of the people in the left-wing extremism dealt areas. And because of these problems with jungle and zameen, that is with water, forest and land, and improper distribution of these and improper access of the tribal people and the local population amongst these things, these are the major factors which alienate people from the masses and the mainstream society. And alienation makes people go towards the philosophy of Maoism, which is why this problem needs to be addressed. Now, these problems, along with multifaceted other problems, which is why Maoism exists in our country, that you can study in the earlier video which we published. But now we will discuss the government initiatives and what the government has been doing in the last many decades to curtail left-wing extremism, Naxalism and Maoism in India. Now, in the year 2015, Indian government came up with a policy, that is National Policy and Action Plan to curtail Naxalism and to solve the problem of Naxalism. Now, it envisages a multi-pronged strategy for security, development intervention, and also ensuring that the rights and entitlements of the local communities, they are given back to them. So the solutions or the government initiatives, they can be clubbed under two heads. One is security related measures and second is development related measures, because see, one point is that this is a law and order problem. It needs to be dealt with security forces. And another is that it is a development problem as well. So development, unless it happens, people would be alienated, and if people keep on getting alienated, they will be going and supporting the Naxals. So this strategy needs to be two-pronged. And the government is having this two-pronged strategy. Let's first come to the security front. Now, in the security front, the government of India is assisting the LWA affected states by providing CAPF forces, that is Central Armed Police Forces, the training, the funds, and also modernizing the state police forces as well. So central government and state police, they are working together, collaborating together. And arms and equipments are being provided by the central government to CAPF and the state police forces. There is sharing of intelligence which is happening, and also creation of a fortified police stations and intelligence networks in order to ensure that Naxalism is eliminated. And to ensure all these things on security front, Government of India is having a strategy, that is Samadhan Doctrine. Now S stands for smart leadership here, A stands for aggressive strategy, M stands for motivation and training, A stands for actionable intelligence, D stands for dashboard based KPIs, H stands for harnessing technology, A again stands for action for each theatre, and N stands for no access to financing. Now all these points under the Samadhan Doctrine, they are one-stop solution for the left-wing extremism if all these points are implemented properly. What lacks here is the implementation. If implementation is totally good, efficient and effective, left-wing extremism problem can be definitely dealt with in a very proper way. Now, alongside the Samadhan Doctrine, government is also strengthening its intelligence mechanisms. So government has been setting up multi-agency centers, MACs, for the center, and state MACs, SMACs, that is state multi-agency centers for the state governments. That is at a state level, and there will be 24/7 basis intelligence sharing networks, which will share the intelligence data, intelligence inputs in relation to Maoist attacks and Maoist presence in different districts. Now, alongside this, one more initiative is Operation Green Hunt, which came in the year 2010, and it involved massive deployment of security forces in the Naxal affected areas. And from 223 districts which were Naxal affected in the year 2010, it was reduced to just 90 districts which are in the red corridor in 9 years. So in 9 years, there was a very considerable decline in the left-wing extremism cases and the districts impacted by left-wing extremism in our country. Now, alongside this, government has also tried to tackle one major way through which these Maoists, they are perpetrating violence. That is through IED, improvised explosive devices. So government is also tackling the challenge of the police forces, the central armed police forces. They're also tackling this challenge of improvised explosive devices, IEDs. And they're the most potent weapons in the hand of Naxals. Now the Union Home Ministry, they have formulated standard operating procedures, SOPs, specifically for these IEDs, in relation to the issues of explosives, IEDs and landmines in the Naxal affected areas, and they have been distributed to all the relevant stakeholders. So this is also what Union Home Ministry is doing. And additional to that, the security forces, CAPF, and the special state police forces, they need to be trained in counter-insurgency procedures and operations. Training activities are in place for jungle warfare, counter-insurgency operations and measures, tactics, psychological operations to win the trust of the local population, and continuous engagement with the communities in order to address the grievances that fuel Naxalism in that particular area. So localized strategies are being developed through training, and all these things plus more are being done on the security side. On development side, alongside the flagship schemes of the Government of India, there have been very specific initiatives as well, only targeting the left-wing extremism areas in the country. Now the special thrust is on boosting infrastructure, involving all those areas affected by left-wing extremism into the mainstream economy. So integrating those areas with the mainstream economy, with the mainstream society. And that will happen how? Through better road systems, expansion of the road networks, improving telecommunication connectivity, providing them education facilities, providing them healthcare facilities. Now all these things the Government of India is doing. And Government of India is having one initiative, ADP, Aspirational Districts Program. And this left-wing extremism impacted areas or districts are under this aspirational district program. And here what is being done? The districts are being transformed and they will become aspirational and eventually the education facilities, healthcare facilities, infrastructure facilities in those districts will improve. And all of these things needs to be providing better access to the markets for the people of those areas. So to provide those people's better access to market, which eventually increases and improves their standard of living also. And while doing all these things, education plays a very pivotal role. And various programs to promote education and skill development are in place by the government, where the government is providing vocational training programs, scholarship for students in the Naxal affected areas, and also employment generation schemes are in place to ensure that people in those areas, development side, they improve and they improve their standard of living. If this remains and security forces remain, we are able to ensure that elimination of Naxalism in our country is fastened. But the logical question still remains that if all these measures are in place, then why still Naxalism is prevalent? Why still so many encounters are happening? And why still we have not been able to solve the root cause of Naxalism? And what can be done in order to improve the situation, and what can be the possible solutions? Now, to discuss about this, we need to look at a very prominent and academic report published by United Service Institution of India, research titled Crafting a Counter Naxalite Strategy. Now, in this research, it is very prominently pointed out that why Indian Naxal operations are not successful to that extent where it should be, and what can be done in order to ensure that we are able to eliminate Naxalism like Andhra Pradesh. Like how Andhra Pradesh has been able to eliminate Naxalism altogether, how other states in the country can be doing so, and what can be the best practices and examples which we can take from other states and other areas in order to ensure that we eliminate Naxalism from our country altogether. See, that research highlighted that government has till date seen Naxalism as a problem and has tried to address it with a three-pronged strategy. So first is using force security measure, second is through dialogue, and third is through developmental measures, socio-economic development of the region. Government has intervened in these three areas, these three-pronged strategies to solve Naxalism till now. Now, Andhra Pradesh has been able to contain Naxalism through this three-pronged strategy itself. So there is no problem with the strategy, that is one thing. But then the question is that why is the same strategy not yielding similar results in other states? Why this same strategy is not yielding same results in Chhattisgarh? Now, the reason given by the research is that each of these strategy or the solutions, they have a number of imperatives attached to it. And these imperatives, they form a very intrinsic part of the overall strategy which the government of India has failed to knit as a comprehensive whole. So government of India has failed to look at all the imperatives in order to ensure that the strategy becomes successful. So one size fits all strategy won't be helpful here. You need to ensure that the strategy is localized. Definitely the main strategy remains the same. That is use of force, dialogue and development measures. This strategy remains the same. But under that the imperative changes. And those imperatives, if followed properly, and the strategy, if it becomes localized, the elimination of Naxalism can be ensured. Now the research says that until and unless these imperatives, they are addressed and they are interlinked to formulate a comprehensive strategy, a coordinated counter-Naxalite strategy, success will continue to elude the security forces. So there won't be success until unless these imperatives are given important. That is what this research is trying to say. Now let's start discussing about these imperatives one by one. First, let's start with the use of force. The strategic imperatives which are involved in the use of force and what needs to be done while the states and the central government are using force in different states to counter Naxalism. Now, so far the counter-insurgency strategies, they have used the Central Police Forces CPOs, or they have raised special task forces, STFs in the state polices like Greyhounds or Cobra, without addressing the lacunas which are associated with the using of the Central Police Forces or this counter-insurgency operations. There are lacunas in this, and it has been suggested that use of Central Police Forces should be considered only after duly analyzing these strategic imperatives. Otherwise, its effectiveness can't be ensured and it will be doubtful. Now let's talk about imperative 1, which is involvement of state police forces. Now the security analysts and experts have pointed out that the state police forces, they have to be at the forefront while fighting Naxalites. It should not be that the central police forces, they are at the forefront. Why? The reason is that the state police forces, since they are from the local state, that is why they know the local terrain. They know the local language, they know the local culture, they know the local terrain, they know the local people. So they have the advantage of being local, which is why they need to be at the forefront. But the problem here is that they are not equipped enough or they are not trained for such combat operations while their training is happening. Their main training is to ensure law and order in the state. They are not trained for counter-insurgency operations. And for that, what needs to happen? For that, special task forces of the state police, that the state police needs to be trained in such a manner. Re-equipment needs to be happening. Re-equipping, re-skilling those state police personals in a way that they become effective in counter-insurgency operations. Guerrilla warfare needs to happen. That is imperative 1. Now, second imperative, very big imperative, is to avoid center-state jurisdictional conflict. See, whenever these kind of operations happen where the central police forces and the state forces, they are involved together. In this case scenario, there are a lot of jurisdictional issues. Now, in a left-wing extremism area, those jurisdictional issues should not arise at all. And these constraints needs to be solved. Why? Because no such restraints are there for the Maoists. They are restraint-free, they are jurisdiction-free. And if you are constrained by jurisdiction, then your strategy to counter Naxalites won't be proper. So whenever a central armed police forces they are entering any state, it should not be viewed as suspicion. And for that, what needs to take place? For that, consensus building for the central government and the state government needs to be there. And in this case, politics should be set aside. Because this is a matter of life and death of people. This is a matter for the integrity of the whole country. So country comes first. And in this case scenario, politics needs to be kept aside, and the state government and the central government needs to coordinate, collaborate, and form a consensus with which there won't be any jurisdictional problems. Now that is second imperative. Now the third imperative which the research talks about is intelligence coordination. And it becomes unfamiliar sometimes, and it becomes difficult for the central armed police forces or army or any other organization, central organizations, armed organizations, who are not very well versed with the local population, local terrain, and local culture to gather intelligence. Which is why here also the role of local insider intelligence informers, police forces, it becomes very important. Heavy deployment of security forces won't help here. What will help is that how effective the state police is in intelligence gathering, how effective are their informers, and are they being dealt effectively or not. And is there a whole network of informer in the whole state, in those regions, spread out for the police or not? If that is the case, then even with lesser battalion of the central police forces, then also in that case the counter-insurgency measures would be successful. Now the fourth imperative under this security, which goes without saying, is that the leadership needs to be very strong and independent of any political pressures. If that is the case, counter-insurgency measures would be successful. That is fourth imperative. And the fifth imperative, which is the most important, is modernization of state police forces. Now see, for Naxalites, there is no foundation. They are not bound by anything. They are not bound by rules. They are not bound by laws, regulations, anything. They are not even bound by budget also sometimes, because they extract money from a lot of different people, from a lot of business houses and businesses in those areas through extortion and through illegal activities. So for budget-wise, they don't have a problem. They don't have to sanction things. Now they steal, they do robbery, they do theft also. So for them, there are no foundations. But there are foundations for the state police forces. And if Naxalites are modernizing their equipments, then state police forces needs to be a lot of steps ahead of the Naxalites in modernization. And modernization, sorrily, and modernization very tragically is not happening in the state police. Still, the guns are very old. The ammunitions which they are using are very old. The gears which they use, they are old. The transport facility which they use, they are redundant. So in all the scenario, unless the state police forces are modernized, more equipments, better quality equipments are there, and alongside equipments, better quality training is provided, the counter-insurgency procedures won't be successful. See, except Greyhounds, no other special armed forces or special police forces, special task force, they follow the SOPs. They are going abruptly. So what needs to be followed is SOPs as well. Only then it will be modernized. And modernization should happen in such a way that police forces, special task forces of police force, they should be able to do counter-insurgency operation in bad weathers, at nights, or at the times when the conditions are not stable and the conditions are not fine, because those will be the times where the Naxals would be very high on the radar of these state police forces. And the counter-insurgency operations can be successful, but only and only if modernization takes place. And if all these imperatives are taken into account and the strategy is a localized strategy, then through the use of force, the Naxalites and the Naxal problems can be solved. This is through use of force. Now, through dialogue also, the central government can solve this Naxal problem. The central and the state government can solve this Naxal problem. But first, you need to know what is the agenda of the dialogue. See, the agenda of the dialogue is to win the hearts and the minds of the masses, hearts and minds of the people. And this can be done by exposing the lack of agenda and preparedness in offering an alternative to the parliamentary democracy by the Naxals. If they are exposed in the masses, in the public, definitely dialogue will be successful and the trust and the credibility of the government with the public will be maintained. But that won't be possible if the third measure is not taken, that is developmental measure. Because until unless you develop the economy, you develop those areas and then you show the lacunas and the lack of preparedness of the Naxalites and the real agenda of the Naxalites, until and unless you develop the region and then you show the reality of the Naxalites, it won't be helpful. So development is also very important alongside dialogue. And while dialogue is happening, dialogue needs to be used as a period of strengthening the forces. Now, while the dialogue is taking place, the forces needs to be strengthened and regrouped. And while this is happening, dialogue needs to be used to expose the Naxalites' weaknesses also. That why Naxals are actually working and what illegal activities they are perpetrating and why their agenda is not right for the national integrity. And also in this case, media needs to be used. Social media plus the conventional media needs to be used to highlight the futility of Naxal violence in our country. All these things are ensured, then the dialogue solution will also be viable. And alongside dialogue, what needs to continuously happen is development. Unless economic development, social upliftment is happening in those areas, people won't be trusting the government. People won't be trusting the local administration. So local administration should be given more powers. Corruption should be totally zero in those areas. And political red tapeism or bureaucratic red tapeism should be non-existent. And transparency and accountability needs to be maintained. So better governance to the people, education to the people, healthcare to the people needs to be provided with this dialogue and use of force. Only then we can develop a comprehensive localized strategy. And all these strategy would be specific for different states. And in that state also specific for different districts. And the district also specific for different regions in that district. If that level of intervention, that level of minute intervention is done, then only we'll be able to solve the Naxalite problem. And here the thing is about winning the heart and minds of people. So gaining the support of masses is critical in any of the counterinsurgency measures. And government needs to show innovation in doing so. So what is very important for all these things is effective implementation and political will. If that is the case, Naxalism's root cause will be eliminated. That is alienation. And for that, overhaul in administration and governance needs to happen. So the thing is that laws, they do exist. But what is required is the political will to implement those laws to the fullest, effectively and efficiently, keeping aside the compulsions of the power politics. See, Naxalism as an ideology, it will be very difficult for us to defeat it if we do not take proper measures, forces, dialogue and developmental measures properly. If we do not take these measures properly, then Naxalism will continue to remain as the biggest problem still to the internal security of our country. And if we don't take these measures at the earliest, in a mission mode, we won't be able to make our country a developed nation by the year 2047. So to achieve that vision, and in this Amrit Kal, that is the period leading up to 2047, we need to ensure that each and every district of ours is developed. Only then India will be developed. And for development of each and every district, this menace of left-wing extremism in our country, this menace of Naxal violence in our country, it needs to go away. And with this, we need to also solve the problem of urban Naxals, which is a new problem which our Prime Minister keeps on highlighting, our Home Minister keeps on highlighting then and now. This also needs to be clubbed with this Naxal problem, and urban Naxal problem needs to be clubbed together, and a proper integrated solution strategy needs to be implemented as soon as possible by the government of India, state governments and the armed forces at the earliest. I hope you gained a new perspective from this session. All the very best, and do let me know what are your views concerning how we can eliminate Naxalism in our country. Do let me know your suggestions and solutions in the comment section. All the very best and have a beautiful day. Thank you.